The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome to Insights. I'm Sherry Stewart. I'm happy to welcome today Denise Bryan, Health Officer representing District 2 and District 4 of the Health Department.
Hello.
Hello. And today we are talking all about coronavirus. So there's a lot of education, there's a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about this issue. And we're going to spend our time today, Denise, talking all about it and educating our viewers about things happening with this fast-moving issue.
I think that's a conversation a lot of people are having today, so it's my pleasure to be here.
Well, again, welcome. So let's just start from the very beginning. So we see the terms coronavirus, we see COVID-19. What exactly is it? Is it the same thing? Is COVID-19, is that the official medical term? Help educate us.
So coronaviruses have been around for decades, and the CDC has named this COVID-19.
Okay.
So that is what's categorizing this virus infection. And it comes from an upper respiratory infection, SARS and MERS. We have seen those before. So it's an emerging pathogen, and there is a lot of research, epidemiology that is concurrently happening, and there's a lot of attention in the news to this as well. So we have a lot of people watching and learning.
Oh, absolutely. Now, what is an epidemic versus a pandemic? What is the difference between both of those terms?
Well, I think what we need to realize, there's outbreaks, so there could be a sporadic occurrence of something that happens, and we investigate with surveillance and epidemiology to characterize what's going on in a community. And as that community is broadened, then we can go to words such as epidemic, and pandemic is across the whole globe, where about 60% of the globe is affected by COVID-19. So we're calling it an epidemic, and some say it's moving towards pandemic.
Okay, so right now, as we know, this is an epidemic.
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the symptoms? I know everybody wants to know what are some of the symptoms, because this is generally flu season. A lot of colds, a lot of sometimes even hay fever. We've had a much warmer winter than we've had definitely from last year. So what are the basic symptoms that people should concern themselves with?
Well, fever is really being characterized, and cough, shortness of breath, and that may be consistent with other things like influenza that you're talking about, or severe allergies, and common cold. And there's a number of things that can make you feel ill. And I think that is what's at play with our medical providers, is that many people may have a cold or feel ill for a short time. And even people may be watching the news and really worried about those symptoms. And I always think being informed is good, and being familiar with your own health and how you may present with something and when to go to the doctor, because it can be individualized based on your health status as well. But it can be mild, present very mildly, or it can develop into severe respiratory distress.
Now, what is about this virus, the COVID-19, what is it about this that separates it from the flu? Because as we see on other news shows or other segments, it seems as though the symptoms are parallel.
Well, this virus is really not boding well with the respiratory system, and so we're seeing pneumonia and severe respiratory complications. And they also are identifying that the vulnerable population are elderly and immune compromised, and even cardiovascular illness, chronic infections and disease seems to be predispositioning people to be, should be a little bit more concerned for making sure they don't get exposed. What we learned today was that 80% of the people, if exposed, will have mild symptoms and recover. And the 20%, they are seeing hospitalization, people needing to go into the hospital at late 40s to 50s, so where it could be moderately affecting their health and needing hospitalization. And there is no treatment, and there's no vaccine, so it's supportive care. And they also know that fatality, mortality risk associates higher with people who are elderly, so at 70 and 80. It's about 2%. Is the number coming out for the general population. And then if someone's older or underlying conditions, it may be as high as 8 to 15% for 80 plus.
And so one of the characteristics about this is that it seems to be fast moving.
Well, I think we're in unprecedented times with the emerging pathogen, and we're mobile. People can go from one side of the world to the other, and we know we can bring infection along with that mobile society. And so the focus really needs to be on good infection control, and really I think a lot of education and preparedness is what will help our viewers too.
Now, where did this start? Did this virus start in China? Is that the first known incidence of COVID-19? Is that where it was identified?
Yes, it's identified back into China, and that country, along with a few others, are at that level 3, where you're not traveling into those countries: China, Iran, Italy, and South Korea.
And do we know how it was transmitted there? I've seen a couple different headlines that it was from human to animal or vice versa. Do we know any truth in that scenario?
They are saying they believe it was from animal to human, and that now it's human to human transmission, and they are looking at symptomatic people who have symptoms of being sick, of being able to spread it from 1 to 14 days.
My goodness. So the fact that we are so mobile, as you're saying, we're a very mobile society. How are we going to contain this? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we just have to work smart and be smart in our travel. There are not travel advisories to not go on spring break. And so I think we have to look at, if you're going on a trip, bring enough medication that if you were detained or quarantined
like on a cruise ship,
a cruise, or if you still were going to Florida, wherever your travel plans are, you know, states are identifying COVID-19 in them, but it doesn't mean it's sustained in the community spread at this time. So just bring enough medications if you were detained, or make arrangements if you have pets back here that they could be taken care of if you are detained in your travels.
Okay, all right. Well, Denise, we are going to take a quick break, and we are talking about the coronavirus, COVID-19. We'll have more on this conversation, answer some more of your questions right after this. Welcome back to Insights. Joining me today is Denise Bryan. She is the health officer for District 2 and 4, the health department here, talking about COVID-19. As we know it, the coronavirus, those terms are both interchangeable. So we want to pick up the conversation. As you said earlier, there is no cure. That means there is no vaccine.
Correct.
So how do we address it then? So how, if you believe that you're having symptoms that are not necessarily the flu, maybe you hit some of the touch points, maybe you are in the senior population, maybe you have a compromised immune system, and maybe family, you know, they're kind of wondering about you, you're feeling, you know, not your best. What should you do at that point? Do you go make an appointment with your physician? What should you do?
Well, at this time, they're really associating, if you have illness and a travel history that created an exposure, then that would increase the likelihood you should see your doctor. Now, last week, all the testing was done through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. That's the state laboratory. This week, what changed is all the commercial labs are now competently trained to do the testing. And so doctors and providers could do the test, the nasal or oral pharyngeal testing, and send it out to the lab or send it to the state. So testing is going to become easier from this point forward.
Okay.
But I think we still have to have that case definition, or doctors need to know that the testing bears merit. And so there's been a potential for exposure. And what I know, the doctors don't want people just showing up sick to the waiting room, nor does everybody else who's in the doctor's office want that either.
Yeah.
So you should call ahead and explain what your symptoms are and what your concerns are, and if you think you were in contact with somebody who's confirmed positive for COVID-19, or if your travel brought you to really a zone of concern. So just being in an airport or being on any particular cruise does not put you at any more risk for testing than people who have stayed in Michigan. But what we know is right now they're looking for that travel history for testing. Call ahead to the doctor, and you'll likely be masked or waiting outside for further directions, and that's good infection control because we know it's spreading in the air. Now, what they're also telling us is that 6 feet distance is about the space for the droplets, for sneezing or coughing. So we really want to teach people how to have lots of tissue and hand sanitizer and wash your hands. And even if you're going to cough into your arm, grab tissues first. Because then you can dispose of the droplets, and then your arm is not going to have infectious material. So I think those are things every one of us can do all the time, is have those good infection control. It just really matters right now as we're all worried about this particular virus spreading.
Right. Let's back up a little bit. So you were saying that one of the identifier, I guess one of those touch points that you really need to hit is a travel history. That's one of the main things that they're looking for. So don't just show up to your physician's office because you have a sniffle that's been going on 2 or 3 days, maybe have a sore throat. Yeah, that's uncomfortable, of course, but if you don't really have that travel history to any of those areas that you just talked about, that probably doesn't put you in line to be tested. Is that right? Okay.
Well, I think the key thing is if people are sick, there could be other things going on that you do need a medical evaluation for. So they're going to want to rule out influenza and other type of illnesses that you may be presenting with. If you have a travel history or contact with confirmed cases of COVID-19, we know medical providers can then order the test, do the test, and submit it to the laboratory. And the turnaround on laboratory results is really within 2 days for that first result, and it's called a presumptive positive. Then they will be sending the specimen on to the CDC for confirmatory testing. I know there is a plan that the state will notify all our Michiganders should the first case end up, and it wouldn't surprise me if we find it eventually here in Michigan, because it is rapidly growing through the United States. I believe we're at 37 states right now have at least 1 case. So I believe we are just at this time under 800 cases and about 26 confirmed deaths. So people do travel, people may have been exposed or have concerns, and you can talk to your provider about that. And then if they order the test and you're going to be tested, you're going to be isolated to home for 14 days.
That was my next question. So if you get tested, what happens next?
Well, then we have to make a presumption that we need to isolate you until we know the test results. And if it comes back then negative, then something else must be going on, or the common cold, and you can then go back about your daily life. If it is that presumptive positive, you're going to stay and be monitored by public health as well as your physician. And at that point, you're quarantined. So isolation is if you're suspected you have it. We isolate people that might be able to spread the virus. But we quarantine known people that have it.
So that's the difference between isolation
and
versus the quarantine. Now, what if that seems that's manageable if, say, for example, if you live by yourself, but what if you have a spouse and children? So what happens then if you're the only one that's maybe traveled? Do they test the entire family? What happens in that scenario?
So anyone being tested is a person under investigation, and we'll be collecting that data as to who the household contacts are, but we'll also be looking at their travel history for that incubation period, the period from the time they traveled to the time they had symptoms. Where have you been? And that's why public health is in place. We've been a safety network for decades, protecting the community. So we'll be looking at the epi-tracing of where that person has been. And if the test were to come back positive, the notification goes out to those groups or individuals of the exposure.
Okay. So does that then mean, though, that the entire family then would be tested, or is it just that one individual that may traveled on business and they came back to, the spouse and a couple kids? Again, the whole entire family's not tested. It's just the individual that traveled to those potential areas, affected areas.
Physicians are ones who order tests. And the other thing we're seeing is the need to quantify the disease and the spread of the disease. So there could be a variety of reasons that more testing is ordered. But I know with other pathogens, at some point, because there is no testing or there's no treatment or vaccine, at some point they may not be testing all the exposed individuals, but it may be a wait and see. So that's to be determined by the physician and the scenario. If there's elderly in the house, we're really going to now quarantine that individual away from at-risk contacts, and then we're going to isolate, monitor, and that really is the infection control to prevent the spread of the virus within the contact group, within the community as well.
Okay. And at this taping, there are no confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the state of Michigan.
Correct. We have no confirmed cases at the time of this taping of COVID-19, and there has been tests that have been sent to the state laboratory, and so they're awaiting some results even now as we're talking.
Okay. Well, we will continue our discussion, Denise, about this epidemic, and we'll have more conversation about what people can do to protect themselves and what they should do if they suspect that they have been exposed. You're watching Insights. We'll return right after this. Welcome back to Insights. We are continuing our conversation with Denise Bryan from the District 2 and 4 Health Department, and want to zone in a little bit more on COVID-19 and how people can really protect themselves. I know we're talking a lot about good hand hygiene and the distance where this virus can stay, I guess, active in the air, if you will. What is that? Is there a range? Is it a range that we can know that it's more likely to be in the air? What should people know?
Well, the CDC is recommending that if someone has the virus and they're sneezing or coughing, the spread from person to person occurs within 6 feet range.
Okay, 6 feet. Okay.
Yes. And then the next is transferring the virus through doorknob handles or other things, the copy machine at work. And so they talk about really sanitizing and cleaning common areas and good hand washing. Soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Make it a good habit throughout the day. And the other thing people can do is avoid touching their face. A lot of people touch their mouth, their eyes, their nose throughout the day, and you got to be really cognizant of that good hand washing and just not touching your face.
Okay, just not touching your face, and that what we learned, I think, in kindergarten, that good hand wash,
Yes.
that's going to come in real handy now. Okay. What else about? I've read. I think I saw a headline that the virus can stay active on money, and I've read that places of worship, for example, are altering their services and things of that nature to avoid, I guess, spreading it if the virus is still active on dollar bills or coins. What can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I would like to say to stay informed, have good hygiene practices and infection control, and not to panic or overthink this.
Okay.
I think it's good to be an informed person and to make choices in terms of what you're doing and what you can do to control the safety of your environment. I call it situational awareness.
Okay.
And so I think those are good things. I've heard as well, place of worship not shaking hands or businesses not shaking
Yeah.
hands. I also think like money, there is lots of germs
Yeah.
with money and
Yeah.
other things. So again, remembering that whether it's flu season or COVID-19, it's just good if you handle stuff that a lot of other people have handled to wash your hands.
All right. Just to make sure we're washing our hands, maybe wiping the surfaces down a lot more than what
Yes.
perhaps we did in the past.
And I agree. And then if you're sick, sick people need to exclude themselves from work, and they, especially fever, diarrhea, that general malaise where you know you're not right. And sometimes people have a work ethic, like they just want to go to work.
Right.
But I think you really have to look at, if you think you might be spreading something, it's better to stay home
Surely.
than to expose other people in the workplace. And we need to look at this for our children as well with daycare and schools.
And I know we talked about earlier, Denise, that this has been such a fast-moving a situation. Tell us how social media has impacted your work with this. I know off cam you were telling me that this has been an unprecedented experience for you, and you've been doing this for over 20-something years.
25 years in public health, and the time that there's information changing from the day before. I've seen that with outbreak investigations.
Yeah.
And I always start the morning with what do we know for sure and what are we expecting to learn today. But from the beginning in December when we saw this come out of China, it's been fast evolving research technology and information about that pathogen. And then with social media, it's been a great modality to keep people informed. And the only flip side is the misinformation, the scams that come up and take advantage of people who are nervous about that. And I think the misinformation that adds to anxiety as well. And that's the interruption that I think we're already starting to see, is people a little more nervous about this. And our healthcare providers are wonderful, informed, competent group that can handle infections, and there's a whole network with public health to help providers then deal with populations, individuals that think they may have been exposed and have this. So I think that's what we need to focus on, what we do know and what we can control. And in terms of the information we all get, I think we just got to keep in mind that if it's usable knowledge and it makes sense, that's okay, but you might not want to believe everything you hear.
Oh, that's true. But one of the things that we are, of course, hearing is that, for example, people are changing, for example, the airline industry. There's been flight reductions. We hear that some sporting events have been maybe altered in terms of allowing people to be in stands. So when people see that, I think when viewers see that, I almost wonder if that sometimes may add to the hysteria or the anxiety. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think I heard about a school closing in Texas and how that disrupts then the life of everybody going to that school. And there's good things and bad things with closing events or schools. And with a school, where will those kids go if they're not all in that group, cohort group together?
Right.
Because sometimes that increases the spread through the community.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen that with other pathogens. So I think if there's events that are canceled, there's a lot of thought by those decision makers as to whether that's the best for that geographic area that's experiencing concerns with the spread of COVID-19. And in Michigan, we have not had our first positive case. We have not had events closed. I think there's a lot of speculation and talk about spring break trips coming up and events, should they be held. And I always say stay tuned to the information because they should be based in facts when those decisions get made.
Absolutely. Well, we are just about out of time today, but are there just 3 quick tips that you can leave our viewers? Is there a website that they can go if they want to read more about what they can do as we end the broadcast? What are some 3 quick tips for the viewers?
Yes, the CDC in the state of Michigan and District 2 and 4 all have websites that have links that your viewers can get more factual information. Wash your hands, make it a good habit throughout the day. Be familiar with your health and create that link to your doctor. Call if you do have concerns that you may have been exposed so that a care plan can be put in place for you. And really think smart about that infection control and for your loved ones, be ready to help them out. So many people may be picking up or doing their grocery pickup. Maybe you're the person that can go help pick up that for elderly or others. So I think we just have to be good neighbors as well.
Absolutely, as we all get through this.
Yes, together.
Absolutely. Well, Denise, I want to thank you for coming in today
You're welcome.
and sharing so much insight about this and helping us maneuver this in a smart and effective way.
And we're committed to sharing the information as this evolves going forward. Thank you.
All right, absolutely. Thank you for watching this week's edition of Insights. I'm Sherry Stewart.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.